Welcome to the Big Kickoff, your one-stop shop for tips and predictions from the Racing Post. Now, make sure you do pick up Wednesday's copy of the Racing Post for your free 72-page guide to the new season. Now, I'm here with Mark Langdon and Joe Casey, and later we'll be hearing from Dundee captain Charlie Adam. Guys, how are we? Excited for the season to get underway?
Yeah, I am. I think the EFL, it was difficult, wasn't it, last year with no fans for the vast majority of the season. And I was speaking to somebody just like, what's the point of the EFL without fans? Because it's such a community sort of base, particularly the lower you go down. And I think the Premier League, I think you can kind of just get away with it. There is a kind of soulness almost to the Premier League, whereas the EFL, it feels like there is that connection with supporters. And so to have them back for the opening weekend, can't wait.
Yeah, Joe, are you looking forward to it? Do you think it's going to be chaos?
Yeah, well, one thing you can always guarantee from the EFL is chaos. Yeah. So I think, we're in for we'll come on to go obviously division by division, but I think this is quite a weak championship this year and it's there for the taking. So I think that'll be a wide open and then super competitive, the other two divisions. So yeah, can't wait.
And if we have a little look back on last season, I mean, obviously we've got to talk about Brentford and we will be speaking more about them in the weekend Premier League preview show, but huge achievement for them. Finally back in the top flight of English football after, 74 years?
Yeah, and it felt like it was deserved. They'd been knocking on the door for a couple of years. At one stage, I actually felt like they were going to win the league. And then when they got close to Norwich, they just stopped and Norwich pulled away from them. And I know a lot of people sort of feared for Brentford in the playoffs because they've been sort of scarred by sort of the past sort of failures, I suppose. But it was deserved. I think they've been a Premier League team in waiting, actually, the way that the owner, Matthew Benham, has relied on sort of the stats-based approach. It's worked well for them. They've been able to be sort of sustain themselves as well, sell players for big money and replace them. And I've kind of always just trusted in their process. I know it maybe took a year or two longer than they would have ideally liked, but I trusted in the process and I'm glad that they're in it. Yeah,
Joe, how impressed were you with Brentford last season?
Yeah, massively. And, they obviously have gone down, like Mark alludes to, kind of a different route, no reserve team, a B team, and players have come through that to go on to make the first team, and they're running in a very, different way to a lot of other clubs, but they've reaped the rewards, and I think in many ways they were one of the better teams for the last few years, and yeah, it's good to see them finally in the Premier League.
Now, the sort of other end of the spectrum, I guess we need to talk about Derby, of course. Not a great season for them last season, of course. It just kind of keeps, it's gone from bad to worse. Really.
Yeah, it has. Obviously, they pushed the boat out to sign Wayne Rooney in the first place, then took a gamble on him in terms of, becoming a manager there. But there's always been this undercurrent of, the ownership being unsustainable, and then the owner wants out. And they're left now in a situation where, as we speak, they haven't even got 11 players, senior players to be playing matches. Wayne Rooney's had his off-field issues as well. He's also injured one of the star players in training in Knight as well, the Irish international. So it's not great for them. There are problems elsewhere in the EFL. You can look at Sheffield Wednesday as well, Reading. Have had issues, even down in League Two, Swindon. So I think a lot of it will be COVID related because this was something that nobody could have really predicted. What it does mean is that there are certain teams, Derby being one of them, if they don't pay their players at any stage this season, they will be immediately deducted points. So I think that is worth bearing in mind. There are a couple of teams there that have maybe got away with it to some extent in the past, but that won't be happening this year.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, surely this is just far too big a job for Wayne Rooney.
Yeah, I mean, fair play to him in some ways for sticking it out. A lot of people would have just packed it in after last season. They just scraped up on the last day of the season, and then to obviously go through all the stuff they've gone through this summer, and it's just feels like I've got a couple of good friends that are Derby fans, and they say it just feels like one thing after another. You finally hear like some good news, and it's undercut by something else. And I do worry as well slightly that even if they do manage to get bodies through the door, are they going to be the kind of players that are going to be up for scrapping out a relegation fight, which is what they are destined for really with that squad. So it's not looking good for them, to be honest with you.
But that's the thing. I mean, how hard must it be for the team to be going into the season when it feels like you've kind of already been written off?
Yeah, I suppose we've been here before with some teams where you can, if you sort out your finances, maybe the takeover can happen. By January, you can have a different team, and so I think the important thing for Derby and some of the other teams that are really running on low squads at the moment, and Wigan this time last year, Wigan, we were saying the same things about Wigan. Now they've got new owners and they're outspending just about everybody, or most teams in League One. It's about hanging in there until January, when you might be able to then improve your team, and you can sort of see whether you've got a chance, can't you? I mean, the players though that they're being linked with at the moment, Derby, the likes of Phil Jagielka, seasoned pros, but actually, can you rely on somebody like that? 46 games in the Championship. I'd say it's difficult. They are the relegation favourites, and some bookmakers are not even betting with Derby at the moment because they're not sure of their situation. So it's going to be tough for them.
But that's the thing. How do you kind of get a certain calibre of a player in when it kind of feels like a sinking ship? I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically going there because of Rooney, or you've got nothing else, or Rooney calls on some of his mates. And that's where you kind of feel like maybe Jagielka and there's a couple of other kind of veterans that have been knocking around. It is just him calling on his contacts, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you feel like there were any standout moments for you guys last season from Leagues 1 and 2 in particular?
I think in terms of League One, what stood out for me was Peterborough, again, being able to find another striker, this time in Johnson Clark-Harris, that... a bit like Brentford, they just seem to be able to sell a striker, and they've had Tony and others in the past, and then just bring somebody else in that can kind of just do the same job. So I was pleased for them. And in League 2, it has to be Morecambe, who the lowest budget in the division, went up via the playoffs. Derek Adams, and we'll get onto him a bit later on, I'm sure. I mean, absolute miracle worker to get Morecambe into League 1. That's some job.
Yeah, we've got some new managers as well in the Championship. Marco Silva to Fulham, Scott Parker to Bournemouth. I mean, which one do you feel like has been sort of the best managerial move in your eyes, Joe?
I think Marco Silva's never managed in the Championship. Obviously, he's had a decent run in the Premier League before, but it's a different kettle of fish. Mm-hmm. I think Scott Parker is a pretty shrewd at Bournemouth. He's obviously been there, done that with Fulham. And he, maybe didn't tarnish his reputation that badly in the Premier League last year. Fulham had a difficult go of it, but they came up through the playoffs so soon before the start of the next season. It was hard for him to really assess what was going to happen with that squad. Relied on a lot of loan players, didn't really come off, but I think Bournemouth have probably the most good manager to progress the players that are there, I would say.
What about Russell Martin then?
I really like Russell. Russell Martin. MK Dons were on my shortlist to win League One, and I crossed them out as soon as he left. And I know there were a lot of players that
unhappy camp over there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the players went to Milton Keynes because of Russell Martin. Mm-hmm. I mean, last year they broke the record for the most passes that led to a goal in Britain. I think it was like 55 or 56 against Gillingham. Third best possession stats in the whole of Europe, behind Man City and Barcelona. He was building something there. I really liked what was going on. He's an interesting character. There's no doubt about that. He thinks about the game, I would say, in a very modern kind of way. And MK Dons weren't far off being a really good team last year. Just maybe struggled a little bit in both boxes. And I felt like he'd done a very good job. And so I'm not surprised Championship teams came calling. Mm-hmm. I am surprised he left on the eve of the season, because I think that's harsh on all the players he brought to Milton Keynes, and I feel like it's a little bit harsh on Milton Keynes as well. Although I know a lot of fans sort of have strong feelings anti Milton Keynes anyway, so they'll say tough luck there. I also think he's walked into a bigger club, but a difficult job at Swansea, and we've seen before, if you make the wrong step in when you're a young manager, you can actually set yourself back a long way. So I feel like he may have been better off being a bit more patient, like the football he preaches, and waited for something slightly better than what looks like a bit of a hospital pass at Swansea.
Ooh, okay, how do you reckon he'll get on at Swansea, Joe?
Yeah, like Mark says, you know, they were up in the playoffs last year, but there's obviously been issues behind the scenes. I think it's also difficult when it's clear that he wasn't the number one target for the managerial position. I think, you know, they obviously went through quite a few of the candidates with no one kind of agreeing to come. They have lost some of the loan signings. Obviously, Steve Cooper, when he was there, he had really good links and was able to bring in people on loan who really helped them last season. Yeah, if he does it at Swansea, he will, you know, it's a risky job to take, but if he does it there, you know, then a Premier League job will come from, definitely.
Yeah, Mark, any transfers in particular that have stood out for you this season then?
I think it probably is at the top end because there aren't that many there isn't that much money floating around, and so when sort of Fulham are able to sign Harry Wilson, you know, for 12 million, that sort of sets a standard, doesn't it, really, of like, you know, we believe we're going straight back up. Now, I know it's sort of one of the more high-profile signings, but it was one that caught my eye because I suppose they're a little bit slow on the transfer front, Fulham, but that was, you know, you've taken... He was good on loan last season, obviously, at Cardiff. Cardiff are, if not in the top sort of promotion pack, they're in that next one where, you know, I think they'd be considered some kind of rival to Fulham, and they've spent the money, they've shown that ambition, so that would be definitely one. Lower down, Mendes Gomez, who's gone to Luton from Morecambe, he dazzled in League Two. Now it's a big step up to the Championship, but I'm excited to see what he could do.
Do you think he'll be able to take the pressure of that then?
I think that he'll be fine. I mean, Luton are my dark horses to go very well in the Championship. So yeah.
How difficult is it for you guys to predict the Championship?
It's difficult.
I feel like this season if there's a sort of big six or a big four in the Premier League, it feels very much like there's a big four in the Championship, where you've got the three teams that came down with West Brom, Fulham and Sheffield United, and then Bournemouth, and they feel like they're quite a bit better on paper, above what the rest are. And usually in the Championship, it's often said that everyone can beat everyone. I do wonder whether we've moved to a different model of Championship now, because the parachute payments are such that it gives the former Premier League teams a bit of a leg up, and particularly in sort of COVID times, some of those sort of outside are unable to sustain the financial pace, as I mentioned there with like Wilson going for 12 million quid.
Do you think we'll see any big surprises then this season in the Championship, or do you think it's kind of set on who will be sitting at the top?
I feel like there's potential for surprise, because I think Joe mentioned it earlier. It's not a very good Championship this year, and that means that somebody from right left field could quite easily get in the top six. Now, last year it was Barnsley that did that. I would say this year it could be like a Luton or a QPR that could, if they don't win it, could at least sort of get into that top six.
Okay, let's get on to your tips and predictions. So, I mean, we've kind of touched upon it there briefly, but who do you think will be the outright winners of the Championship this season?
You know, August is a time for ambition and throwing a few darts at some big prizes, and I think Luton around about 50-1 could surprise a lot of people in the Championship. This under Nathan Jones, we're talking about sort of Russell Martin being a very good manager. Nathan Jones twice took Luton up. Then he went to Stoke, had an absolute nightmare at Stoke. Went back to Luton, kept them up with a team that was in desperate relegation trouble. Then they finished 12th last season. So he has done nothing but improve them year on year. And they are very smart recruiters. I think Amari Bell from Blackburn, I've already mentioned, you know, signing players from Morecambe as well. They think outside the box a little bit with their signings, and it's not going to take that much, I don't think, for somebody to get in and around those each-way places. And so I think Luton, with a steady sort of manager, kept most of their best players. They have lost striker Collins to Cardiff, but I think that to me they look like at 50-1 worth a few quid.
Okay, Joe, who's your outright winner? Surely we've got to be talking about Fulham. No, I know that's a bit obvious.
Well, I did think at the prices, Fulham do seem a little bit too obvious.
Okay.
I would be a bit worried, that whole team was essentially replaced last year with loan signings. None of them have stuck around. So a lot of people who were sitting on the bench last year, all of a sudden it's going to be like, right, you're in the first 11, you need to go and send us back up. So you do worry about, is that the best recipe for coming straight back up? At a slight, not quite Luton price, but I think Bournemouth are set up quite well. They made £80 million last year, and obviously they haven't reinvested that yet. They were probably correcting for some of their mistakes in the Premier League with that money, but they have a good squad. Parker is a good manager at this level, and players like Danjuma, who's probably one of the best players outside of Buendia last year in the Championship. He's been linked with a move away, but in such cash-strapped Championship season, if Bournemouth suddenly have £50 million, that puts them so far ahead of other teams. So I think even if they were to lose someone like that, Philip Billam was really impressive last year when he was moved into a slightly more advanced role. I think Solanke gets a bit of a bad rep, but he's definitely someone who this is his level really, or this is, at this point it's his level. So he is a good focal point. And they've been really linked with Freddie Woodman at Newcastle, the goalkeeper. He had the most clean sheets in the Championship last year. Been a bit of a COVID issue at Newcastle. They held on to him. Looks like that might be getting resolved, so he might end up going on loan to Bournemouth. They've got some of the big wages off the books, Begovic, Wilshere. So I think they're in a position where they could go out and say they were knocking on the door in January, spend a little bit, and then that would push them over the line. Okay,
so who else do you think will secure promotion then from the Championship?
Yeah, I think Fulham will be up there.
You'd think so, right?
I mean, if they're not, then Marco Silva's had a nightmare really, because they should be. A lot of those players got them up previously, so I would say it's just whether you want to back them around about 5-1. Like with West Brom as well, a new manager Ishmael has come in from Barnsley, plays a very I suppose unique style of play. They're going to press the hell out of the opposition. It's quite direct football, and I think it might just take a little while for them to get going. They might be a team, and you see this quite often in the Championship, teams that start slow and then really kick on. Sheffield United, Jukanovic has done very well at this level previously. He's got a couple of promotions on his CV. I just didn't like the way that they played last year, and sort of getting that mentality of like, right now we're going to be winners again. It is difficult. If they keep Sander Berge, then I'd say they've got a better chance. But he's been linked with moves away, and Ramsdale is as well. I just feel like there might be some more stuff happening at Sheffield United. So
a bit too unsteady, perhaps.
Yeah, it feels like that way. It may be a better team to assess, at the end of August when you really know what's going on. I'm going to go for another outsider to get promoted, and that's QPR. I think QPR did really well last season. They finished strongly. They're around about 25-1 to win the Championship. Charlie Austin came in, scored a lot of goals, but it wasn't just that. I think what's happened is they got the Eze money like the last summer, and that has enabled them to strengthen in a number of positions. And for quite a few years, QPR's transfer policy was all over the place, but it looks a lot shrewder now. They've managed to turn like Johansson's loan deal into a permanent one as well. And come the end of last season, they were definitely up there as one of the sort of the best teams outside of the obvious ones. If they can start that way, I think they've got a decent chance of promotion.
Ooh, okay, Joe, who are you going for promotion then?
I'm going to go slightly more obvious with Fulham. I think they might not quite have enough to win it, but I think they've got to be knocking on the door. I would be touched on it a little bit. I would be a little bit worried about West Brom with Ishmael coming in. He's going to play completely differently to Big Sam. Last year I think the statistic PPDA, which is just a way of saying how much they press. West Brom had the second lowest pressing in the Premier League, and Barnsley, who Ishmael managed, had the highest in the Championship. So you're asking a team to switch almost completely in styles. Like you said, that might click halfway through the season, but I don't know, it's a bit of a gamble. So I think the rock solid option is Fulham. And another team that I do like, kind of despite myself, is Ishmael's old team, Barnsley. I know they surprised so many people last year, but they just play so differently to everybody else in the league. Just relentless pressing, direct play. You know, they are just kind of, a lot of players who played against them came out after the game and said, I've never played a game of football like that in my life. Like, it's just so different to how they play in the rest of the league. I think that could be, even with a new manager, losing Mowat to West Brom, for most teams that'd be, you know, a death sentence, but they've changed managers a few times and that's not really seemed to have made a huge amount of difference. As long as they play the style of play that they are after, then that seems to be successful.
Okay, what about relegation, Mark? Who are you thinking?
Well, I mean, you know, Derby are the obvious shout. We've spoken quite a lot about them. So maybe there's only 2 spots up for grabs. And I think the promoted teams that are coming up, I think they'll be okay. Blackpool were really good last season in League One. Peterborough, I think, are excellent in the transfer market, and when they went down previously in the Championship, it was with like a record points tally, so they were really unlucky. And Hull need to do a little bit of work, and that they've been handicapped somewhat by sort of transfer embargo. But I felt like they were good winners of League One last year, so
they're all staying up.
That puts a lot of teams under pressure. One I looked at was Blackburn, just because Harvey Elliott was so good on loan last season. He's obviously gone back to Liverpool. Armstrong, the forward, I think as long as they keep him, they'll be okay. He's been linked with moves, so that's one to watch. As it stands, I think Reading are too big for relegation. Not often you hear a player goes from Reading to Bayern Munich, but Omar Richards has gone from Reading to Bayern Munich, so obviously a big loss. Elise, as well, has gone to Crystal Palace. Some people say he was the best player in the Championship last season. I think Buendia was the standout one, but he was, in terms of the younger players, he wouldn't have been far off, I suppose. So he's going to be a big loss. They've been unable to sign players. I think Reading are in trouble.
Okay, what about you, Joe? Similar views to Mark?
Slightly different. A team that I would be very worried about is Bristol City.
Okay.
Nigel Pearson took over halfway through last year. Managed 14 games, only won 2 of them. The underlying stats hated Bristol City last year. Okay. Their XG goal difference, so the difference between their XG and their XG conceded, was minus 35.5, which was almost 10 worse than Wickham, worse than everyone else in the league by an absolute country mile. They averaged, I think, 7 shots a game, and they conceded the second most, so it's not like they were really good going forward and then poor at the back. Yeah. Bad both ways. He's brought in Andy King, 34 years old, Matty James, 30, from obviously both were with him at Leicester. I just worry about them. I don't know if that's really a kind of sign of a team going forward and a team progressing. They lost one of their strikers last year who scored 10 goals. Now they're relying on Chris Martin, who's getting on, and Naki Wells. For me, Bristol City, I would be worried about.
Okay, what about top scorer or any other tips that you might have?
Yeah, so I've got 2. In terms of top scorer, Solanke, who's been mentioned by Joe. I expect Bournemouth to do well this season. I mean, it should be at least top 6. And Solanke, a funny player, because when he was coming through with sort of the England youth, was so highly rated. He was at Chelsea, obviously did very well there, got a move to Liverpool, and then they sold him for an absolute fortune to Bournemouth, and it didn't work out for him in the Premier League. Last season, I thought there were enough signs to suggest that he's at a level now where he can succeed, and he's still only 23. I mean, like, he's been written off. He's been written a bit like, I suppose, Ryan Brewster has now been written off, and you've got to give players time and chances to develop. Maybe he'll never be quite as good as people hoped he would when he was sort of, part of that England setup that did so well. But I think he's a big runner in this Championship Golden Boot, where Mitrovic, I think, is an obvious runner as well. But I just thought Solanke should give punters a good run for their money.
All right, Joe, any tips from you?
Yeah, well, I'm going to go obvious for top scorer. Championship top scorer has become a bit of a favourite happy hunting ground. Ivan Toney last year was favourite going into the season. Year before, it was Mitrovic, and I'm going to stick with Mitrovic again.
Yeah.
His record at this level is just so good for Fulham. And I just think, Marco Silva's come out and said he's going to be our key man this year. We need to get him fit and firing. Seemed like he kind of, I don't know if he fell out with Scott Parker, but he just kind of wasn't in his plans. And maybe he is a case of one of those players that is just, if there was a league between the Championship and the Premier League, he would be, key player in that. But he's really good at this level. He just scores goals, physicality, penalties. He can give Championship defenders the run around, and I think it's an obvious selection, but I think he will go well.
Okay, now one man who does know all about the Championship is Charlie Adam. Let's get his thoughts ahead of the new season. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us. I know your season has started already. How are you getting on?
Yeah, we started at the weekend home to St Mirren. Obviously, we drew 2-2. We've not been in the league for a long time, and it was a good start for us to especially going down to 10 men. We had to hang on the last 20 minutes, and we probably could have nicked it in the end. But no, we're happy with the point, and we look forward to Celtic on Sunday.
Brilliant. Now the Championship is right around the corner. You must be excited for it to get started.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's West Brom Bournemouth's probably It's a great game for the Championship season to get off to a flyer, and both teams relegated. Not relegated. Bournemouth obviously never come up through the playoffs, and they're strong. West Brom not lost many players, so it's going to be an interesting season. But I think there's going to be a couple of surprise packages this season.
Oh, go on! Like who? You can't just tease us like that.
Do you know what? I'm looking forward to seeing what Luton do. I thought they finished the season really well. Nathan Jones, who I know, I think they can maybe be a very outside chance for getting close to the playoffs. I think we have to look at Luton. Peterborough, I think, are a team that could be a surprise package, but do they have the experience to go and do it in the Championship? And, my old club, Blackpool, it's great to see them back in it. So I'll be looking forward to seeing how Blackpool do next season, because it's another step up for them.
Yeah, like you said, Blackpool, newly promoted. How do you think they will do in the Championship?
Well, I think they've added good key senior players now. Richard Keogh coming in, I think, will be big for them at the back. Getting Chris Maxwell signed on a new contract. Jerry Yates, they've rewarded the players that have got them there to the Championship, and it seems good harmony in the camp. Neil's obviously got momentum from last season coming up through the playoffs, and as long as they start well, then they'll be competitive in the Championship. But it's a tough league to be involved in.
It is indeed. And another former side of yours, Stoke City, they have been linked to Manchester City's Liam Delap. How do you think they're going to get on?
I think they'll be okay. I think this is probably the best opportunity in the last couple of years for them to come up. They started to get rid of the big earners. Michael's starting to get people into the football club that he wants, and the group is stable now, and there's not always wholesale changes. So it's a club that I want to do well. I had many great years there, and it's a club that if they can start well, get the supporters in the back, then they might be in and around the playoffs come the end of the season. So it'd be good to see them go, and obviously they've been linked with Liam Delap. Obviously it's Rory's son, and that adds a little bit of pressure, but I think he would add them something different, especially when they were losing somebody like Sam Vokes. And
Charlie, I want a prediction from you. Who is going to win the Championship?
Oh, you've put me right on the spot.
No pressure.
To win it?
Surely there's someone in your head, one team that really stands out.
I think you've got to look at West Brom. I think if you look at they don't lose Sam Johnston and the players that they've got, Diangana, Pereira, people like that. I think they'll be the favourites for it.
Okay, and do you have someone who you think will be top scorer?
I'm going to go for Charlie Austin.
Okay, brilliant. Right, Charlie, thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure. I'll let you get back to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great to hear Charlie's thoughts there. Anyway, let's move on to League One. I mean, how difficult and competitive is League One? Do you feel like people sometimes underestimate it?
Well, they definitely shouldn't this year because it is ultra competitive. I think, a team like Sheffield Wednesday going down ordinarily would really fancy their chances.
Yeah.
I mean, they're a big club in the Championship in many respects. I know they've been out of the Premier League a long time now, but they've walked into probably the hardest League One that I can remember. If the Championship's weak, League One is the absolute opposite because so many teams have got money in there. Ipswich are spending a fortune. Sheffield Wednesday and Sunderland, by their very nature, are big clubs. Wigan have got a lot of money and just recently been taken over. Then you've got kind of, I suppose, your solid teams like Charlton, who will expect to be top six. Portsmouth will have their eyes on, maybe if not automatic, certainly the playoffs. Then you've got Lincoln, weren't far away last year either. There's probably about 8 teams that feel like they should be top 2 this season, and of course the maths doesn't work out. Not all of them can even make the playoffs. So this is a hard league this year. I'm really looking forward to it, probably more than the Championship.
Yeah, I was going to say, Joe, are you kind of most excited maybe for League One?
Definitely, yeah. And for all the reasons above, it is going to be ultra competitive. There are so many teams that you could give a good shout to here that have either come off the back of very solid years last year or have undergone big changes Wigan or Ipswich. So, yeah, I think you've got to be excited about this league this year.
Yeah. Okay, Mark, who is your outright winner? You knew that was coming.
I did, yeah, and it's a tough one. I'm going to avoid those that are flashing the cash at the moment. I've seen it before, and quite often when you just get all this money and completely new team, it can take a while to get going, and then you might find yourself in a position where you can't win the league because you're too far off. You do go up, but that's why I'm going for Charlton, because I feel in Nigel Adkins have got a really clever manager for this level. He had a couple of months to assess the squad at the end of last season, so where others are kind of still using pre-season probably to bed in what they want, in someone like Paul Cook, for instance, at Ipswich, a basically brand new team, it's going to take time, I would imagine, even if they are on paper the best team in the league. Whereas I think we know from Charlton that, Nigel Adkins has got them playing how he wants, and so they can hit the ground running. Signed the goalkeeper from Portsmouth. They had a very solid defence last year. And also, we know from past experience, the sporting director, Stephen Gallen, is very good in the loan transfer market. So I would expect a couple of Premier League loanees. I mean, they had Conor Gallagher, who's in the Premier League now. Previously, they've signed good players from lower down. He knows what he's doing. And also someone like Stockley came in, the big centre forward for them, sort of last season again. So it's more about the continuity of the team rather than maybe some of Charlie Wyke apparently is on an absolute fortune at Wigan, and I'm sure he'll do good for them, but it's just about building that team. So I'd rather be with somebody that I kind of know what I'm going to get.
Okay, interesting. Joe, outright winner for you?
I'm going to sound like a sucker for teams that splash the cash here.
Total opposite.
I know. I think Ipswich have just put together a really good squad. I mean, on paper, you look at the players they've brought in. Raheem Harper, he was like West Brom's next big thing a couple of years ago. Connor Chaplin was playing obviously for Barnsley last year. George Edmondson, come from Rangers. You've got the keeper from Salford, who many people thought was best keeper in League Two last year. And you add on to that, they've kept a lot of their young players, which I think is obviously a big... There's Flynn Downs, who plays in the middle. He's really highly thought of, and I think he'll be a big player from this year. So I think, yeah, they've definitely got a great shout. Paul Cook, he obviously took Wigan up from this division before. The new owners have come in and they've seen a manager who has done it at this level, and they've basically given him a bit of a blank checkbook to say, bring in the players that you think will be able to get us up. And it's nice to see after the doom and gloom that you've had for years there, them being able to actually look forward to a season again. So I think Ipswich splashing the cash, but I think it might come good.
No, I mean, I think, when you got like Piggott and Bond potentially up front, I mean, it does look a really strong team on paper. I mean, and if they win, I'll be kicking myself. It's such an obvious one, but I've fallen for them. I've fallen for these kind of teams before, so I'm a little bit wary of doing it again.
Well, who else do you think will get promoted then?
I think I quite like Wigan in terms of those that are kind of spending the money, because I still think there's maybe a bit of value in their price, but we'll get on to, there might be some other ways that we can sort of back Wigan that we'll get to a bit later on in the top goal scorer market. But I'm going to go for another sort of solid team rather than sort of one that's splashing the cash, and that's Portsmouth. And for similar reasons, really. Adkins had a little bit of time at Charlton. The Cowley brothers, again, got to assess the squad at the back end of last year, just missed out on the playoffs. They've lost a few big hitters, but I don't think the fans are that bothered by the players that have left. They've still got a really exciting front three of Ronan Curtis and Harness on the wings and Marquis up front. So I think that front three is still good, and I'm betting on the Cowley brothers as much as anything else. I mean, their record speaks for itself. At Huddersfield, I just felt that it was probably just the wrong team for them and the wrong environment for them as well. But what they did previously at Lincoln, I think deserves massive respect. And it won't take much either for a team like Portsmouth to get on a roll again. I think they were one maybe that missed out from the fans of home advantage. Fratton Park is horrendous place for opposition teams to go and play when the sort of that Fratton faithful are fully behind the team, and the Cowley brothers are really good at tapping into that kind of environment. So I'd go for them, and I'm sure Joe's not going to put up Sunderland given his Newcastle links.
But surely Sunderland's got to be a favourite, no?
Well, they call the manager Streaky Johnson because he has these massive ups and downs, and I mean they've lost Wyke. I mean, maybe the team will look better at the end of August. At the moment, I don't massively fancy them, but there is still time for them to put a team together, and it's been a little bit slow going, really, I think, rather than what you'd expect to sort of hit the ground running.
Yeah, I mean, obviously no bias here.
Sure.
But I think the problem with Sunderland is you've just seen time and time again, they just can't be trusted to, kick on. And like you were saying about streaky Lee Johnson, that's exactly the manager that you don't want at Sunderland, because they go on these runs where they look, great, and then just, I think getting Aidan McGeady fit and firing again has been a big thing for them. And if they do go up, I think it'll be down to him. Alex Pritchard's a pretty nice signing. He could recapture some of his old form. But at the back, they're going to miss Dion Sanderson, who was there last year from Wolves. And I'm just not sold on Lee Burge, the keeper. They might bring in a new keeper. But I know that a lot of Sunderland fans aren't happy with the goalkeeping for a long time. They've been, since Championship days, they've been unhappy with the goalkeeping. I'm going to go with Mark as well, with Portsmouth. I think a very solid, you were talking a bit about Nathan Jones at Luton earlier. And that's a similar path where you have an amazing run with this team, take a job you're maybe not suited to in the Championship, and then struggle, drop back down to that level and be successful. And I think that's definitely what the Cowleys will be trying to do this year. They've brought in Bazunu, who's a really good young keeper from Man City on loan. He's already made his debut for Ireland, full international. So I think they've kind of quietly, maybe not with the same, gusto as Ipswich or Wigan or whatever, but they are assembling a very good squad quietly, and I think they'll go well.
Okay, what about relegation then? What's the best bets and tips for that?
Well, I think that the teams that came, because League One looks so strong this year, the teams that have come up have kind of come up in an unfortunate year where it's a lot stronger than usual. So, I mean, I am looking at the obvious candidates here. I think Morecambe are the favourites. I think they probably will go down. The better bet for me, though, is Cambridge, who surprised almost as much as Morecambe in sort of going up last season automatically. It was a fantastic achievement from them, and no doubt about that. But Mullin, the striker who scored all their goals, he's dropped down 2 levels to go and play in non-league, and so much of their creativity is around Wes Hoolahan, and he can't play back-to-back, so they often rest him for midweek games, so he's available to play on the Saturday. He's obviously another year older. I just wonder whether he'll be able to sustain his fitness, because if he does, they've got a chance. If he doesn't, I think that they'll finish bottom.
Okay, what about you, Joe? Who's getting relegated?
I would echo the Cambridge sentiment. There was a crazy stat last year that from Boxing Day till the end of March, Cambridge won 11 of their 15 Saturday games when Hulan was playing, and then midweek games they lost 5 of 6 because he wasn't playing. So they are so reliant on his creativity.
Like he's just way too good, isn't he, for that level, you know?
And then to lose 30 goals from Mullen, that's hard to replace just straight off the bat. So I think they're up against it. And another one I'd be a little bit worried about is Fleetwood. I worry about maybe, they weren't great on the numbers last year, and I don't know, they haven't really brought in anyone where I thought, that was a good signing. The owner, I think, has tightened the purse strings. A lot of big players left this summer, and I think they could be another ones that.
Okay, Mark, you said earlier about having a tip for a top scorer.
Yeah, and I'm going for a Wigan player in this one, and it's not the obvious one because Charlie Wyke is, he should be up there. He's being paid enough to score the goals for Wigan this year. But I think his strike partner, Stephen Humphrey, who's 40-1. Humphreys has been underrated really in this market. I saw him when he was. I used to watch a lot of Southend when he was there, and he was a good player for them. Got a serious facial injury. When he came back, he scored a goal that kept them in the division. Scored a lot of goals and looks a quality player last season as well, playing for a struggling team. Now he's a side that should be right up there at the top end of League One. And I just think he's got a bit of quality about him now. Whether he gets enough chances, because Wyke's going to get a fair amount of Wigan's goals, you would assume. But at 40-1, I thought he was worth a few quid.
Okay, nice one. Okay, League Two. Shall we move on to League Two? Who are your outright winners?
I quite like Forest Green. Playoff heartache last year, but they've brought in a really interesting manager, Rob Edwards. He worked with Wolves under 23s, and then he went into the England setup. He was England under 16, and worked with England under 20s. And he just, a young, very exciting manager, plays good football. They've kept a lot of their team from last year, and added a couple, and I think they're at a bigger price than, say, the more obvious, like Salfords of the league. I think they're a setup. They've given him kind of the opportunity to kind of impress and to impose his style of play on their team. And I think they are a good shout.
Mark?
Yeah, I'm going to go for somebody at sort of the different experience level. If you were doing a rating level for Edwards, it'd be like 1 out of 10. I'm going for somebody who's 10 out of 10 at this level. Derek Adams at Bradford City. He's already got promotion from this division twice. Once with Plymouth, and then miraculously, really, with Morecambe. Such a tiny budget. Worked wonders. Even in Scotland, Derek Adams did a fantastic job as well. Couple of promotions on his CV north of the border. He's a bit of an odd character. I don't think it'd be wrong to say that. But I think he plays on that. I also think that fans being back for Valley Parade will be massive for Bradford, because they are one of the biggest teams, if not the biggest one in League Two, and they are the sort of side, if they get on a roll, will not only be able to turn their home ground into a fortress, they'll be going away from home, sort of having more fans than some of the home teams, because it's such a well supported club. I think Gilead from Scunthorpe is a really good signing. Big Andy Cook. He's not going to win a 100-metre race, but he can win a lot of headers, and he should score a lot of goals for Bradford. I like them each way. I'd be very surprised if they're outside of the top 3.
Who else would be a good bet for promotion then?
I quite like Carlisle. Carlisle had a really unlucky year last year. They were best team in the league, basically, top of the league, had a massive COVID outbreak. Really kind of just struggled to recover from that. Ended up finishing 10th, but they conceded the least XG from open play of any team. Just seem to have, hit upon a really, they play a very high intensity game, a lot of pressing, and, they this year, perhaps with like a bit of a less congested schedule. Carlisle obviously have to travel the furthest of any team, basically. So I think with a bit less congested schedule and with a squad back, they've added Zach Clough as well, who's a good forward. I think he's been one of those players that has done quite well at levels above and maybe isn't like the star player for a team in League One or whatever, but he's dropping down to this level. He'll probably be their main source of goals, and I think Carlisle should go well.
Yeah.
I mean, Salford should be up there. I mean, their budget, the expectations of the club. I mean, something will go wrong if they don't go up this year, but they don't really appeal to me at the odds. I thought Mansfield, a team that I think I've backed for about, this might be about the 10th year running, but it's at least the third. It's at least the third year running, but I'm going to have one more chance at the stag party here because I think Nigel Clough, he's never really going to get a job done quickly. Somebody that likes to build, and so he's had last season to have a look at things. Their budget suggests that they should be up there. The quality of their players suggests that they should be up there. I'm not quite sure why they haven't been in the last few years, but another good opportunity for them. I think they've now got the right manager with the, everything else that was already there, the budget, the players, now got the manager. I'd be surprised if they were out of the picture.
Okay, what about your tips for relegation?
I would be a bit worried for Hartlepool.
Okay, because they've just
obviously,
floated.
Came up so late in the day through the playoffs. Had a great run. Obviously, the National League is one extra game through the playoffs as well, so had a grueling season. They've lost basically the two players that fired them to promotion. Oates and Armstrong up top have both gone to other League Two teams. That's 30-odd goals that they're going to have to replace out of that team. They just haven't had time to get the players in. They lost Cass at the back as well, who was a good player from last year. I would just think, to turn a squad over so quickly, it's going to be really difficult.
I mean, the playoffs were going on while the Euros were being played. That's sort of how long sort of into the season it was, or even the start of this one, depending on which way you look at it. I mean, I would fear for Hartlepool as well. But teams that come up have got a very good record of staying up. So that puts me off slightly, albeit that this is probably different circumstances. But I thought Scunthorpe struggled a lot last year. They've lost some important players. The budget just looks like it's been completely cut, almost as if they'd settle for finishing 22nd. It almost looks like at the moment, and they're a team that I would be surprised if they weren't sort of in that sort of bottom four for most of the season, just hoping. It sounds a bit harsh, isn't it? Hoping they get relegated, but from a betting point of view, hoping they fall into the bottom two.
Okay, let's just quickly touch upon domestic competitions. The FA Cup, the magical FA Cup. What would be a good better prediction for that?
I think Arsenal would be one that I'd be looking at. Obviously, Arteta I mean, as a Spurs fan, I shouldn't be saying it with such a smile on my face, but I think Arteta's already won an FA Cup. So I think you can tell he takes the competition seriously.
Arsenal like an FA Cup.
Arsenal have got a very good record in the FA Cup. They've got no European commitments, which I think is key. I think they'll improve on last season. And Man City have got a much better record in the EFL Cup than the FA Cup, and I think that's because the latter rounds of the FA Cup coincide with like quarterfinals, semi-finals of the Champions League, and we've seen even in semi-finals, Pep has picked like 10 different players. Yeah. So I think that City are not an easy team to write out of any competition. I'd rather take them on in the FA Cup than the League Cup.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Joe?
At a bigger price, I quite like Brighton. Okay. They got to the semi a couple of years ago. They're not going to have any European football to focus on. They will obviously have the Ben White money to spend. I fancy them to go quite well in the Premier League, and I think if they could translate a bit of that form into the FA Cup, then there's definitely worse prices around.
Okay, what about the Carabao Cup?
Yeah, I mean, this is just a Man City benefit, and I don't see any reason to think that it won't be again. To be honest, because Guardiola's second team is better than most first, so he can rotate. Yeah. And then, of course, he comes up against teams like, say, he comes up against a United, a Liverpool. They're not putting out their best team either. So, it's difficult to say, they can't be beaten, because of course they can in any one-off game. But I would much rather back if I was looking to back Man City to win one competition this year, it's probably the one he'd want to win least. But I think that I'd rather back them to win the EFL than any
Really,
other.
than the Premier League?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Joe, what about you?
Well, yeah, it's hard to oppose City, but I think, you know, you've got to look at other teams with deep squads up at the top of the Premier League, and Chelsea have obviously got very deep squad, you know, even though they're giving away youngsters to every Premier League team who's after one at the minute. But they still have that strength and depth. You know, you look at some of the players who don't, Kovacic doesn't really get a game, like some of the players who are just Hudson-Odoi, you know, Abraham.
Emerson played in a European Championship final, didn't he, for Italy? And, you know,
He can't get a game for
third choice left back.
So I think, yeah, you have to have them in mind, definitely.
Yeah, okay. And lastly, one tip each that you are most confident on, Mark.
Right, this is top Midlands club in League One.
Right.
It's a three-way battle between Lincoln, Burton and Shrewsbury. I think Lincoln are a really solid bet here. I mean, I don't see them dropping too far off where they were last year. And if they're even sort of top 10, I would imagine that's enough to win this. Shrewsbury have had some big issues off the pitch. COVID affected their manager, and hopefully Steve Cottrell will be okay. But I mean, the results have been pretty iffy for a while. And I watched Burton on Friday night against Newcastle in a pre-season friendly. Kane Hemmings, their striker, got injured. And Malt, the other striker, was already injured. So that means their two forwards are already out. And I'm not quite sure why and how Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank managed to get such a response out of them last season when he picked them up from sort of relegation certainties. But to me, they look like a bottom third League One team, as do Shrewsbury, and Lincoln very solid in this market.
Okay, Joe?
This isn't my number one, but I didn't mention it earlier, but for League One top scorer, I quite like Plymouth's Niall Ennis. Quite a big price, I think he's 66s. Jeff Cott is probably about half the price who he plays, he'll share the striking duties with, but he's very streaky. He went on a crazy run last year. He scored kind of 14 or 15 goals in a very short period of time, but didn't do much either side. Ennis was at Wolves in the kind of youth system there, struggling to get game time, going out on loan. I think sometimes these young players just need a club to say, right, we believe in you, we're going to put you up front.
Them. Yeah.
So he joined in January, scored 6 goals in 20 games, which isn't an amazing return, but I think with that experience under his belt, he's quick, he's a good finisher. I think he could go well. And then my top bet would be Ipswich to win League One.
Okay, brilliant. Guys, thank you so much, Mark and Joe. And of course, to Charlie, and thank you guys for watching. Remember to like and subscribe to the Racing Post YouTube channel. And please always remember to gamble responsibly.